Heavenly Father, I pray for everyone watching this video right now. May you bless them with peace, joy, and breakthroughs in their lives. Amen. Hello, my wonderful family. I am so glad and grateful to have you here with me today. Your support means the world, and I truly don't take it for granted. Before we dive into today's powerful story, please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, drop a comment below to share your thoughts, and of course, hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an update from this channel. The background check came back. Sarah Mitchell's hands froze on 5-year-old Lily's hairbrush as her employer's voice carried up the stairs, his phone conversation drifting through the mansion's marble halls like a death sentence. She'd been living on borrowed time for 8 months, pretending to be someone she wasn't, loving a child who called her Nanny Sarah, and a man who looked at her like she might be the answer to prayers he'd stopped believing God would hear. "Everything looks clean," Sebastian Cross continued, his deep voice carrying the relief she'd been dreading. Sarah Mitchell, 26, education degree from Portland State, clean criminal record, references from 3 previous families. Nothing to worry about. Lily tugged on Sarah's sleeve, her enormous gray eyes, so much like her father's, bright with the innocent trust that made Sarah's chest ache every single day. "Nanny Sarah, you're pulling too hard." "Sorry, sweetheart," Sarah whispered, forcing her trembling hands to gentle as she worked through Lily's dark curls. "Sometimes grown-ups get distracted thinking about boring stuff." "Daddy says thinking too much gives you wrinkles," Lily announced with 5-year-old authority. "That's why he has lines here." She pointed to her own smooth forehead. "But you don't have wrinkles, so you must not think very much." If only that were true. Sarah had been thinking non-stop for 3 years. Thinking about the life she'd destroyed, the people she'd failed to save, the reason she could never be Sarah Mitchell for real. Because Sarah Mitchell was a carefully constructed lie, complete with forged documents and manufactured references, designed to hide the truth about who she really was. And what she'd done. "All finished," Sarah said, setting down the brush and trying not to think about how many more mornings she'd have like this. Quiet moments in Lily's sunshine yellow bedroom, surrounded by stuffed animals and picture books, and the kind of innocent happiness Sarah had forgotten existed in the world. "Will you read to me before school?" Lily asked, climbing onto her bed with the pink bunny that never left her side. "The one about the princess who saves herself?" Sarah's throat tightened as she settled beside Lily, opening the worn picture book they'd read together dozens of times. It was Lily's favorite. The story of a princess who didn't wait for rescue but learned to fight her own dragons and save her own kingdom. Sarah wondered if Lily would still love that story when she learned that some people couldn't save themselves, couldn't outrun their dragons no matter how far they ran. "Once upon a time," Sarah began, her voice steady despite the chaos in her chest, "there was a princess who lived in a tower surrounded by thorns." The story was interrupted by footsteps on the stairs. Sebastian's familiar measured gait that still made Sarah's pulse quicken after 8 months of working for him. She'd tried so hard not to fall for her employer, had reminded herself daily that crossing that line would complicate everything. But Sebastian Cross was nothing like the cold billionaire she'd expected when she'd answered his ad for a live-in nanny. He was gentle with Lily in a way that suggested he'd learned tenderness through loss. Patient with Sarah's nervous habits and mysterious gaps in her employment history. Beautiful in the unconscious way of someone who'd never traded on his looks, who barely seemed to notice that his gray eyes and dark hair made him look like he'd stepped out of some corporate fairy tale. Most dangerously, he was lonely in the specific way that called to Sarah's own isolation. 2 people who'd learned not to trust easily, slowly discovering they might be able to trust each other. "How are my girls doing?" Sebastian asked from the doorway, and Sarah's heart clenched at the casual possessiveness in his voice. "My girls." Like they were a family instead of an employer and his hired help. Like Sarah belonged here instead of living on borrowed time. "Daddy." Lily launched herself off the bed and into Sebastian's arms with the fearless love of a child who'd never doubted she was precious. Nanny Sarah was reading about the dragon princess. Was she? Sebastian's eyes found Sarah's over Lily's head, and the warmth there made her stomach flutter with equal parts desire and terror. "And what did we learn from the dragon princess today?" "That sometimes the best way to win is to be brave enough to tell the truth," Lily said solemnly, unknowingly driving a knife through Sarah's ribs. "Welcome to a story about the dangerous space between the life you want and the truth you're hiding, where love and trust become the very weapons that can destroy you." "Very wise," Sebastian said, though his eyes never left Sarah's face. Sarah, do you have a minute? I wanted to discuss Lily's schedule for next week. Sarah nodded, following him out of Lily's room on unsteady legs. She knew this conversation wasn't really about schedules. It was about the careful dance they'd been doing for weeks, the way Sebastian had started finding excuses to talk to her alone, the way his hand lingered when he passed her coffee in the morning. They walked to his study in comfortable silence, but Sarah's mind was racing. The background check had come back clean because she'd paid a fortune to make sure it would. But background checks could be run again, deeper ones, by people with more resources than a busy single father typically had access to. People like private investigators, like federal agents, like the kind of people who might start asking questions if a billionaire's nanny suddenly caught their attention for the wrong reasons. Sarah, Sebastian said, closing the study door behind them. I need to tell you something, and I'm not sure how you're going to react. Sarah's blood turned to ice. What is it? Sebastian moved closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne. Something subtle and expensive that she'd started associating with safety and home and all the things she couldn't have. I think I'm falling in love with you. The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. Not because they were unwelcome, God, how she'd dreamed of hearing them, but because they made everything so much worse. Because falling in love with Sebastian Cross was the one thing that could destroy the careful life she'd built from the ashes of her old one. Sebastian, she whispered, backing away from the tenderness in his eyes. You can't. We can't. Why not? He followed her retreat, his voice gentle but determined. Sarah, I see how you are with Lily. I see how you light up when you think no one's watching. I see how you've brought joy back into this house after 2 years of just surviving. Because I'm your employee. Because it's complicated. Because Sarah's back hit the bookshelf, trapping her between Sebastian's approaching warmth and the leather-bound volumes that probably cost more than most people's cars. Because you're scared, Sebastian said quietly, his hands coming up to frame her face with infinite gentleness. I'm scared too, Sarah. After Elena died, I thought I'd never feel anything again except the obligation to take care of Lily. But you've changed that. You've changed everything. Elena, Sebastian's wife, who died in a car accident when Lily was 2. Sarah had seen the photos throughout the house. A beautiful blonde woman with Lily's smile and the kind of effortless elegance that came from being born to wealth and happiness. The woman Sebastian had loved completely, whose loss had nearly destroyed him. The woman whose death was Sarah's fault. You don't understand, Sarah said desperately, even as Sebastian's thumbs traced along her cheekbones with devastating tenderness. There are things about me you don't know. Things that would change how you feel. Try me, Sebastian said, leaning closer until Sarah could feel his breath against her lips. Whatever you're hiding, whatever you think is so terrible about your past, it doesn't change who you are now. It doesn't change how I feel about you. But that was exactly what it would change. Because Sarah wasn't hiding some embarrassing family secret or a youthful mistake. She was hiding the fact that she was Dr. Sarah Chun, the emergency room physician who'd been working the night Elena Cross was brought in after her accident. The doctor who'd made the split-second decision that killed Sebastian's wife. The reason his daughter had grown up without a mother. Sebastian, Sarah whispered, her voice breaking as he leaned closer, as her traitorous heart responded to his nearness despite knowing how impossible this was. If you knew the truth about me, you'd never want to see me again. Then don't tell me yet, Sebastian said, his lips barely brushing hers in a kiss that felt like both salvation and damnation. Let me love you first. Let me prove that whatever you're running from doesn't matter as much as what we could build together. As Sarah melted into the kiss she'd been dreaming about for months, as Sebastian's arms closed around her like she was something precious rather than something guilty, her phone buzzed against her hip with a text message that made her blood freeze. Asterisk Dr. Chun, your past has caught up with you. We need to talk. Detective Morrison, Seattle PD asterisk. The kiss broke as Sarah gasped, her hands pushing against Sebastian's chest as the full weight of her situation crashed down on her. The police had found her. Which meant the medical board investigation she'd been running from was back on. Which meant the lawsuit Elena's family had filed against the hospital was being reopened. Which meant Sebastian was about to learn that the woman he was falling in love with was the person responsible for destroying his entire world. Sarah's hands shook as she deleted Detective Morrison's text, her mind racing through escape routes while her heart shattered at the thought of leaving Lily and Sebastian. 3 years of running, 3 years of rebuilding herself from the ashes of one terrible night, And it was all crumbling because she'd made the fatal mistake of falling in love. Sarah? Sebastian's voice was concerned, his gray eyes searching her face. What's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost. I am a ghost, Sarah thought desperately. I'm the ghost of Dr. Sarah Chen, and I'm haunting your life without you even knowing it. Just work stress, she managed, forcing a smile that felt like broken glass. I should go check on Lily before school. But Sebastian's hand caught her wrist as she moved toward the door, his touch gentle but insistent. Wait, talk to me. Whatever that text said, whatever's troubling you, we're a team now, Sarah. You don't have to handle everything alone. The kindness in his voice nearly broke her. Sebastian Cross was a good man, better than good. He volunteered at children's hospitals, funded medical research, had started a foundation in Elena's memory to improve emergency room care. He was everything noble and generous that Sarah had failed to be that night 3 years ago when exhaustion and overwork had led to the mistake that killed his wife. Sebastian, she said carefully, what if I told you that I wasn't who you think I am? That I've done things, terrible things that hurt people I cared about. Sebastian's thumb traced along her pulse point, and Sarah wondered if he could feel how her heart was racing with panic and guilt. I'd say that whoever you were before doesn't matter as much as who you are now. The woman who reads bedtime stories with different voices for every character. Who sits with Lily during thunderstorms and teaches her that being scared is okay, but being brave is better. Sarah's chest ached with the weight of undeserved praise. If Sebastian knew the truth, he'd realize that every moment of tenderness she'd shown Lily was tainted by guilt. Every story she'd read an attempt to give back something she could never replace. You don't understand, Sarah whispered. The things I've done. Did you hurt someone on purpose? Sebastian asked quietly. No, but did you make a mistake that you've carried with you every day since? Sarah's breath caught. How did you? Because I recognize guilt, Sarah. I've been carrying it for 2 years. Sebastian's voice went rough with old pain. The night Elena died, I was supposed to drive her to that charity gala. But I had a conference call with investors in Hong Kong, something that seemed urgent at the time. I let business take priority over my wife's safety. Sarah's heart stopped. She remembered that night in excruciating detail. The rain, the crash, Elena Cross arriving in the ER with multiple trauma and a blood alcohol level that had puzzled everyone until they'd realized the wine she'd consumed at dinner had interacted fatally with prescription medication she'd been taking for anxiety. If I'd driven her, Sebastian continued, she wouldn't have been on that road during the storm. Wouldn't have swerved to avoid that other car. Wouldn't have. His voice broke. I killed my wife with my priorities, Sarah. I chose money over the woman I loved, and Lily lost her mother because of it. Sebastian, no, Sarah said urgently, her hands finding his face. Car accidents happen. You couldn't have known. The way you couldn't have known that whatever choice you made was going to haunt you for years. Sebastian's smile was sad and knowing. Guilt is a familiar friend, Sarah. It whispers that we're responsible for things beyond our control, that we don't deserve happiness because of our failures. Sarah stared at him, seeing the man who'd blamed himself for his wife's death, while not knowing that he was comforting the person actually responsible. The irony was so cruel it took her breath away. Her phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't a text, but a call from a number she didn't recognize. Answer it, Sebastian said gently. Whatever it is, we'll handle it together. Sarah's finger hovered over the accept button, knowing that once she answered, there would be no going back. Her carefully constructed life would begin its final collapse. Hello, Dr. Sarah Chen. The voice was crisp, professional, female. This is Detective Morrison with Seattle PD. I think it's time we talked. Sarah's blood turned to ice as she realized Sebastian could hear every word. His eyes were already widening with confusion as the detective continued. The medical board is reopening the investigation into Elena Cross's death. New evidence has come to light suggesting that the attending physician's treatment decisions may have been compromised by factors not disclosed in the original inquiry. I think you have the wrong number, Sarah said desperately, but Sebastian was already stepping back, his face pale with dawning understanding. Dr. Sarah Chen, Detective Morrison continued relentlessly, former emergency medicine resident at Seattle General. Last known address 847, Pine Street, apartment 3B. I'm sure you remember the night of March 15th 3 years ago. The night Elena Cross died under your care. The phone slipped from Sarah's numb fingers as Sebastian stared at her with the look of a man whose entire world was reorganizing itself around a truth too horrible to accept. "You're Dr. Chun," he said slowly, his voice hollow. "You're the doctor who treated Elena the night she died." Sarah wanted to explain, wanted to tell him about the impossible choice she'd faced that night. Elena or the 7-year-old boy who'd been brought in at the same time, both critical, both needing immediate surgery, both depending on her to choose who lived and who died. She wanted to explain that she'd made the only decision she could with the information she had, that Elena's hidden medical history had made her condition unsurvivable even with perfect treatment. But all that came out was, yes. Sebastian's face went through a series of expressions: shock, betrayal, something that might have been understanding, then a cold anger that made Sarah's soul shrivel. "You've been living in my house," he said quietly, each word precise and cutting. "Caring for my daughter. Letting me fall in love with you. And the entire time, you were the person responsible for making Lily an orphan." "Sebastian, please let me explain." "Explain what? That you've been lying to me for 8 months? That every story you told Lily, every moment of comfort you gave her, was built on the foundation of taking her mother away." Sebastian's voice was rising, years of grief and guilt transforming into rage. "What kind of person does that, Sarah? What kind of monster builds a relationship with the family they destroyed?" The words hit Sarah like physical blows, each one confirming every terrible thing she'd told herself during 3 years of running. She was a monster. She was exactly the kind of person who would infiltrate a family's grief and pretend to heal what she'd broken. "Daddy!" Lily's small voice from the doorway cut through the confrontation like a knife. She stood in her school uniform, backpack in hand, looking between her father's furious face and Sarah's tears with the confused worry of a child who sensed her safe world shifting. "What's wrong?" Lily asked, her bottom lip trembling. "Why is Nanny Sarah crying? Why do you look angry, Daddy?" Sebastian and Sarah stared at each other over Lily's head, both realizing that whatever happened next would determine not just their own futures, but the future of a 5-year-old girl who'd already lost too much. "Lily, sweetheart," Sebastian said, his voice carefully controlled. "Why don't you go wait in the kitchen? Nanny Sarah and I need to finish talking." "Are you going to fire Nanny Sarah?" Lily asked with the directness that made children both precious and terrifying. "Because I don't want her to go away. She makes you smile again." Sarah's heart shattered as she knelt to Lily's level, memorizing every detail of the little girl's face. "Lily, baby, sometimes grown-ups have to make difficult decisions." "No," Lily said firmly, her gray eyes blazing with determination that was pure Sebastian. "You can't go away. You're supposed to stay and be my family." "Lily," Sebastian's voice was strained. "There are things about Nanny Sarah that we didn't know. Things that change everything." "Like what?" Lily demanded with 5-year-old logic. "She's still nice. She still makes good pancakes. She still reads the princess story the right way." Sarah looked up at Sebastian, seeing the war playing out on his face. The father who wanted to protect his daughter from more loss, the man who felt betrayed by the woman he'd trusted with his heart, the grieving husband who'd finally learned the name of the person responsible for his wife's death. "Lily," Sarah said gently, "sometimes people make mistakes that hurt other people, even when they don't mean to. And sometimes those mistakes are so big that they change everything." "Did you make a big mistake?" Lily asked solemnly. Sarah's voice broke as she answered. "Yes, sweetheart. The biggest mistake anyone could make." "But you're sorry?" "More sorry than you could ever know." Lily considered this with the seriousness of someone far older than her years. Then she wrapped her small arms around Sarah's neck and whispered, "Mommy used to say that being sorry means you get to try again. That love is bigger than mistakes." Sarah closed her eyes as Lily's words destroyed the last of her composure. Elena Cross, the woman whose death had driven Sarah into exile, had raised a daughter who believed in forgiveness and second chances. The irony was so perfect it felt like cosmic justice. "Lily, go to your room," Sebastian said quietly. "Now." Lily looked between them one more time, then trudged upstairs with the heavy steps of a child who knew her world was about to change again. When they were alone, Sebastian walked to his desk and pulled out a file folder Sarah hadn't noticed before. Her blood chilled as he opened it to reveal medical records, police reports, and photographs from the night Elena died. "I hired a private investigator last week," Sebastian said, his voice emotionless. "Not to investigate you, to investigate the doctor who treated Elena. I wanted to understand what happened that night, wanted to see if there was anyone to blame besides myself." Sarah stared at the file, seeing her own handwriting in the medical notes, her signature on the death certificate. How long have you known? I got the report this morning. 20 minutes before I told you I was falling in love with you. Sebastian's laugh was bitter. Do you know what the investigator found, Sarah? Do you know what really happened the night my wife died? Sarah shook her head, unable to speak. You didn't kill Elena, Sebastian said quietly. The other driver did. The drunk teenager who ran the red light and sent her car into that guardrail. By the time she reached your hospital, her injuries were unsurvivable. Multiple trauma, internal bleeding, cardiac arrest. You kept her alive for 47 minutes longer than any other doctor could have. The words hit Sarah like a tidal wave. That's not. The medical board said I made the wrong choice. They said if I'd prioritized her surgery over the child. The medical board was wrong. The investigator spoke to every nurse, every resident, every attending who was there that night. You made the right call, Sarah. You saved the boy, and you gave Elena long enough to say goodbye. She was conscious for the last few minutes. She asked the nurses to tell me she loved me. Sarah's legs gave out, and she sank into the nearest chair as 3 years of guilt and self-hatred cracked apart like broken stone. I don't understand. The lawsuit, the investigation. Elena's parents needed someone to blame. They pressured the medical board, hired lawyers, made your life hell because they couldn't accept that sometimes terrible things happen to good people. Sebastian closed the file with mechanical precision. You didn't kill my wife, Sarah. But you've been living in my house under false pretenses for 8 months. You've been lying to me and my daughter about who you are. Sarah looked up at him, seeing the man she loved struggling with the collision of relief and betrayal. I thought I was guilty. I thought I'd killed her. So you decided to what? Atone by taking care of her daughter? Make yourself indispensable to her family. Sebastian's voice was cold with anger that had nowhere else to go. Did it ever occur to you to simply tell the truth? How could I? How could I look you in the eye and say, "Hi, I'm the doctor who was treating your wife when she died"? How could I risk having Lily taken away from the only family I've known for 3 years? Family? Sebastian's voice cracked with something between fury and pain. Sarah, we're not your family. We're the people you've been lying to. Every kiss, every tender moment, every time you said you cared about us. How much of it was real and how much was guilt? The question hung in the air like a challenge, and Sarah realized that her answer would determine everything that happened next. She could play it safe, claim it had all been guilt, and maybe Sebastian would let her leave quietly. Or she could tell the truth and risk everything on the chance that love might be stronger than betrayal. I fell in love with Lily the first day I met her, Sarah said quietly. Not because she was Elena's daughter, but because she had this amazing capacity for joy despite everything she'd lost. I fell in love with you because you were this incredible father who put your daughter's happiness above your own grief. The guilt brought me here, Sebastian, but love made me stay. Sebastian stared at her for a long moment, and Sarah could see him fighting with himself. The man who wanted to forgive warring with the father who needed to protect his daughter. Detective Morrison wants to see you, he said finally. The medical board investigation is being reopened not to pursue charges against you, but to clear your name. Elena's parents have recanted their accusations. Why now? Because they hired their own investigator and learned what I learned, that you were a scapegoat, not a killer. Sebastian moved toward the door, then stopped. Sarah, I need time to process this. I need to figure out how to explain to my daughter that the woman she loves has been lying about who she is. What do you want me to do? Sebastian's smile was sad and exhausted. I want you to pack your things and move to the guest house for now. I want you to meet with Detective Morrison and clear up whatever legal issues remain. And I want you to decide who you really are, Dr. Sarah Chin, who made a hard choice and saved a child's life, or Sarah Mitchell, who built a life on someone else's foundation. As Sebastian left her alone in his study, Sarah realized that the first betrayal hadn't been learning about her identity. It had been learning that she'd been innocent all along. That 3 years of guilt and exile had been built on other people's need for someone to blame. Now she had to decide whether to reclaim the life she'd abandoned or fight for the life she'd built in the ashes of her false guilt. And whether Sebastian Cross could ever love a woman who'd hidden the truth for 8 months, even if she'd hidden it for all the right reasons. Sarah had barely finished packing her things when the black limousine pulled into the circular driveway like a hearse arriving for a funeral. Through the guest house window, she watched 2 figures emerge, Harold and Margaret Whitmore, Elena's parents, moving with the predatory grace of people who'd spent their lives getting exactly what they wanted. Her phone buzzed with a text from Sebastian. Asterisk, stay in the guest house. Don't let them see you, asterisk. But it was too late. Margaret's sharp eyes had already found Sarah's silhouette in the window, and her smile was arctic with satisfaction. Sarah's blood chilled as she realized this wasn't a coincidence. The Whitmores had come here specifically because they knew she was here, which meant someone had told them. Sarah's hands shook as she called Sebastian, watching through the window as Harold and Margaret approached the main house with the confidence of people who held all the cards. They know I'm here, Sarah said when Sebastian answered. This isn't a social visit. I know. Sebastian's voice was grim. Margaret called an hour ago. She said they had concerns about Lily's welfare and needed to discuss custody arrangements immediately. Custody arrangements? Sarah's stomach dropped. Sebastian, what aren't you telling me? Before Sebastian could answer, Sarah heard car doors slamming. More vehicles were arriving, a white van with Channel 7 News emblazoned on the side, followed by 2 police cars. The quiet suburban street was transforming into a media circus. Sarah, listen to me very carefully, Sebastian said urgently. Whatever happens next, whatever they try to make you do, don't run. If you disappear now, they'll use it as evidence that you're unstable and dangerous. Evidence for what? Harold Whitmore is a federal judge. Margaret sits on the board of Seattle Children's Hospital. They've been planning this for months, using their connections to build a case that I'm an unfit father who endangered Lily by hiring a doctor with a history of questionable judgment to care for her. Sarah's world tilted as the full scope of the trap revealed itself. They've been orchestrating this. The reopened investigation, the detective's call, even your private investigator, was recommended by Harold's clerk, Sebastian confirmed grimly. They wanted me to discover your identity at exactly the right moment, when they could use it as ammunition for a custody battle. Through the window, Sarah could see reporters setting up cameras while the Whitmores spoke with uniformed officers. Margaret was gesturing toward the guest house with theatrical concern, her voice carrying clearly across the manicured lawn. She's been living here under false pretenses for 8 months, officers. A mentally unstable woman with a history of medical malpractice, alone with my granddaughter. We have reason to believe she may have developed an unhealthy obsession with our late daughter's family. That's not true, Sarah breathed, but even as she said it, she realized how it would look to outsiders. A doctor who'd been blamed for a patient's death, living under a false identity in the victim's home, caring for the victim's child. It sounded like the setup for a psychological thriller. I know it's not true, Sebastian said fiercely, but they have enough circumstantial evidence to make it look suspicious. If they get temporary custody of Lily while this plays out in court, he didn't need to finish. Harold Whitmore had connections throughout the legal system, resources to drag out custody proceedings for years, and now the perfect narrative. A grieving grandfather protecting his granddaughter from an unstable doctor and the negligent father who'd hired her. Where's Lily? Sarah asked urgently. Safe. For now. But if Child Protective Services gets involved, if the court orders an emergency custody hearing. Sarah closed her eyes, seeing the trap with crystal clarity. The Whitmores hadn't just been seeking justice for Elena's death. They'd been planning to use that death to claim the only piece of their daughter they had left. Lily. They're using me, Sarah realized. My presence here gives them grounds to question your judgment as a father. Yes. But Sarah, there's something else you need to know. Sebastian's voice carried a weight that made her stomach clench. The investigator found something in Elena's medical records. Something that changes everything. Before Sarah could ask what he meant, someone knocked on the guest house door with the sharp authority of law enforcement. Through the peephole, she could see Detective Morrison flanked by 2 uniformed officers, their expressions professionally neutral, but their hands positioned near their weapons. Dr. Chun, Detective Morrison called. We need to speak with you immediately. Sarah looked around the small guest house that had become her sanctuary, seeing all the careful normalcy she'd built. Books on child development, Lily's artwork hung on the refrigerator, photographs of the 3 of them at the zoo and the park, and a dozen other happy moments that now felt like evidence in a crime she didn't commit. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Asterisk, this ends now. Come outside and accept responsibility for what you've done, or watch that little girl pay the price for your cowardice. M.W. Asterisk. Margaret Whitmore was done playing games. Sarah opened the door to find Detective Morrison's expression more sympathetic than she'd expected. "Dr. Chun, I need you to know that I'm here as a formality. The investigation into Elena Cross's death has been officially closed, all charges cleared. But the Whitmores have raised concerns about your current living situation that require immediate attention." "What kind of concerns?" "They're alleging that you sought employment with the Cross family under false pretenses, that you've been emotionally manipulating both Sebastian and Lily Cross, and that your presence here represents a danger to the minor child's psychological welfare." Sarah stared at the detective, seeing the careful neutrality of someone who didn't believe the charges, but was required to investigate them. "And you think there's merit to these allegations?" "I think," Detective Morrison said quietly, "that sometimes people with good intentions make choices that look questionable to outsiders. I also think that sometimes grandparents use the legal system to process their own grief in ways that don't serve anyone's best interests." Through the main house's windows, Sarah could see the Whitmores talking with Child Protective Services representatives while Sebastian gestured emphatically, clearly arguing for his daughter's right to stay in her own home. But she could also see the media cameras capturing every moment, turning a family crisis into public spectacle. "Dr. Chun," Detective Morrison continued, "I need to ask you directly, have you at any time acted inappropriately toward Lily Cross? Have you attempted to position yourself as a replacement for her deceased mother? Have you engaged in any behavior that could be considered manipulation or emotional exploitation?" The questions hit Sarah like physical blows, each one designed to make her months of genuine love and care sound predatory. "No. Everything I've done has been for Lily's benefit. I love that little girl. That's what Sebastian Cross told me. It's also what 3 separate child psychologists confirmed when they evaluated Lily's well-being this morning." Sarah's breath caught. Sebastian had Lily evaluated? As soon as he learned about the custody threat, Dr. Martinez, Dr. Patel, and Dr. Stevens all concluded that Lily is exceptionally well-adjusted, shows no signs of psychological manipulation, and has clearly bonded with you in a healthy caregiver relationship. Detective Morrison's smile was slight but genuine. It's actually quite rare to see such positive evaluations, especially for a child who's experienced the loss of a parent. Hope flickered in Sarah's chest, but it was quickly extinguished by the sound of arguing from the main house. Through the windows, she could see Harold Whitmore holding up legal documents while a woman in a business suit, clearly from Child Protective Services, took notes. "However," Detective Morrison continued, "the Whitmores have obtained a temporary restraining order requiring you to maintain a distance of at least 50 feet from Lily Cross until a formal custody hearing can be held." "On what grounds?" "Potential psychological harm due to your deceptive relationship with the family and unresolved issues related to the deceased mother's death." Detective Morrison's tone made it clear what she thought of the legal maneuvering. It's thin, but Judge Whitmore has significant influence in family court. Sarah felt the walls closing in around her as the trap revealed its final mechanism. She couldn't be near Lily, couldn't comfort the little girl who was probably terrified by the sudden invasion of strangers and cameras. Couldn't fight for the family she loved without violating a court order that would only strengthen the Whitmore's case. "Dr. Chun," Detective Morrison said gently, "I need you to understand something. If you choose to fight this, it's going to get ugly. The Whitmores have resources, connections, and a narrative that will be very appealing to a jury. Grandparents trying to protect their deceased daughter's child from an unstable woman who infiltrated their family. And if I don't fight, then Lily Cross loses the woman who's been her primary caregiver for 8 months. Sebastian Cross loses the person who helped him heal from his wife's death. And 2 people who clearly love each other let other people's manipulation destroy their chance at happiness." Sarah stared at the detective, seeing the choice crystallizing with brutal clarity. She could run, pack her things, disappear into another false identity, spare the Cross family the media attention and legal battles that fighting would bring. It would be the safe choice, the selfless choice, the choice that would protect Lily from being caught in a custody war. Or she could stay and fight for the family she'd found in the aftermath of the worst night of her life. Stay and risk everything, her reputation, her freedom, her heart, on the chance that love might be stronger than manipulation. Through the main house windows, she caught sight of Lily peering around Sebastian's legs, her small face pressed against the glass as she searched for her nanny. When their eyes met across the distance, Lily pressed her hand against the window with the desperate faith of a child who believed the adults in her life would protect her from forces she couldn't understand. That's when Sarah knew there was really no choice at all. "Detective Morrison," Sarah said, squaring her shoulders with determination she hadn't felt in 3 years. "I need you to know that I'm not running this time. I'm Dr. Sarah Chun. I saved a child's life the night Elena Cross died, and I've spent 8 months loving her daughter like she was my own. If the Whitmores want to fight, they're going to get one. Dr. Chun, you should know, if you fight this, you'll have to testify about that night. Every decision you made, every procedure you performed, every moment of Elena's treatment will be dissected in open court. Are you prepared for that?" Sarah thought about Elena Cross, dying in her hospital bed while Sarah fought desperately to save her life. About the choice between Elena and the 7-year-old boy, both critical, both depending on split-second decisions made under impossible pressure. About the 47 minutes Elena had lived after the accident, conscious and aware enough to send final messages of love to her husband and daughter. "Yes," Sarah said firmly. "I'm prepared to tell the truth about what happened that night. All of it." As Detective Morrison nodded and stepped aside, Sarah walked toward the main house where Sebastian was waiting, where Lily needed her, where the fight for their family was about to begin. Behind her, Margaret Whitmore's voice carried across the lawn. "She's approaching the house. She's violating the restraining order." But Sarah didn't stop. She'd spent 3 years running from a guilt she'd never deserved. She wasn't going to spend one more day running from a love she'd earned through every story she'd read, every nightmare she'd soothed, every moment of joy she'd helped create. The point of no return wasn't a place, it was a choice. And Sarah Chin had finally chosen to fight. The emergency custody hearing was set for Monday morning. 72 hours for Sarah to prove she wasn't the unstable doctor the Whitmores had painted her as, while maintaining the court-mandated 50-foot distance from the child she was fighting to protect. The legal absurdity would have been laughable if it wasn't destroying their lives in real time. Sarah sat in Sebastian's study at 2 a.m., surrounded by medical records and legal documents, preparing testimony that would either clear her name or destroy any chance of maintaining contact with Lily. Across the room, Sebastian paced with the controlled energy of a man trying not to punch through walls. "The good news," their attorney Patricia Wong said with the grim efficiency of someone who specialized in impossible cases, "is that we have 3 child psychologists willing to testify that Lily shows no signs of psychological manipulation or trauma related to your care. The bad news is that the Whitmores have 6 character witnesses prepared to describe you as obsessive and inappropriate." "Character witnesses who have never met me," Sarah said, reading through depositions from Seattle medical staff who'd worked with her 3 years ago. The statements painted a picture of a doctor under pressure, making questionable decisions, struggling with cases beyond her experience level. "That doesn't matter in family court," Patricia replied. "Perception often carries more weight than facts, especially when one side has a federal judge pulling strings behind the scenes." Sebastian's phone rang for the 15th time in an hour, reporters, hospital administrators, colleagues offering support or demanding explanations. He'd stopped answering after the first few calls had revealed just how far the story had spread. Billionaire's nanny revealed as doctor and wife's death was trending on social media, complete with speculation about inappropriate relationships and psychological manipulation. "We need to discuss the other issue," Patricia said carefully, glancing between Sarah and Sebastian. "Sebastian, you mentioned finding something in Elena's medical records that hasn't been disclosed. If it's relevant to this case." "It's not relevant to the custody hearing," Sebastian cut her off sharply. "It's a private family matter." Sarah looked up from the depositions, noting the way Sebastian's jaw had tightened, the way he wouldn't meet her eyes when Elena's medical records were mentioned. "Sebastian, if there's something that could help." "There isn't," he said firmly, but Sarah caught the flicker of something in his expression: pain, guilt, and what looked suspiciously like fear. A soft knock on the study door interrupted the tension. Sebastian's housekeeper, Mrs. Chun, peered in with the apologetic expression of someone bearing bad news. "Mr. Cross, I'm sorry to disturb you, but Miss Lily is asking for her nanny. She's been crying for the past hour, and she won't let me read to her." Sarah's heart clenched as she imagined Lily alone in her room, confused and frightened by the sudden absence of the woman who'd read her bedtime stories for 8 months. "Can I?" "You can't go within 50 feet of her," Patricia reminded her gently. "Any violation of the restraining order will be used against us in court." "But I could talk to her from the hallway?" Sarah asked desperately. "Tell her a story through the door?" Sebastian's expression softened as he saw the anguish in Sarah's face. Mrs. Chun, would you ask Lily if she'd like Nanny Sarah to tell her a story from downstairs? We could use the intercom system. As Mrs. Chun went to check with Lily, Sarah felt tears threatening for the first time since the crisis began. She was being reduced to a disembodied voice, a ghost haunting the house where she'd found the only family she'd ever known. This is what they want, she said quietly. The Whitmores want me to look exactly like this, desperate, inappropriate, crossing boundaries. Every interaction becomes evidence of my unhealthy attachment. Sarah, Sebastian said, moving closer but stopping just short of touching her. The restraining order didn't technically prevent him from comforting her, but they both knew that any sign of romantic involvement would be used as ammunition against them. We're going to fight this. We're going to win. Are we? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like we're playing a game where the rules keep changing and the other side controls the board. Before Sebastian could respond, Patricia's phone buzzed with an alert that made her face go pale. Channel 7 just aired a segment about the case. They interviewed Dr. Harrison, your former supervisor at Seattle General. Sarah's stomach dropped. Dr. Harrison had been the attending physician who'd ultimately supported the medical board's decision to blame her for Elena's death. His testimony had been the final nail in the coffin of her career. Patricia pulled up the news segment on her tablet, and they watched in silent horror as Dr. Harrison sat in his pristine office, expressing grave concerns about Sarah's judgment and mental stability. Dr. Chun was under tremendous pressure that night, he said to the camera with practiced sympathy. Multiple trauma cases, limited resources, and frankly, she wasn't ready for that level of responsibility. The decision to prioritize the pediatric case over Mrs. Cross was questionable at best. Son of a bitch, Sebastian muttered, but Sarah held up a hand to stop him. Wait, listen to what he's not saying, Dr. Harrison continued. Of course, we've since learned that Mrs. Cross had undisclosed medical complications that might have affected the outcome regardless. But at the time, Dr. Chun made a choice that cost a young mother her life. Undisclosed medical complications, Sarah repeated slowly. Sebastian, what did your investigator find in Elena's medical records? Sebastian's face had gone carefully blank, the expression he wore during difficult business negotiations, when he was hiding information that could change everything. Sarah, this isn't the time. This is exactly the time. Sarah stood, moving closer to him despite Patricia's warning look. If Elena had undisclosed medical complications, if there was something in her history that affected her treatment, I need to know. We all need to know. Mr. Cross, Patricia said carefully, if there's information that could exonerate Dr. Chun, withholding it could be considered malpractice on my part. Sebastian walked to the window overlooking the garden where Lily's swing set sat empty in the moonlight. For a long moment, he was silent, and Sarah could see him wrestling with some internal conflict that went beyond legal strategy. Elena was pregnant, he said finally, his voice barely audible. The words hit the room like a bomb. Sarah felt the world tilt as the implications crashed over her. The medication interactions, the blood work abnormalities, the reason Elena's body had responded so unexpectedly to treatment. She was 6 weeks pregnant, Sebastian continued, still not turning around. She hadn't told me yet. Was planning to surprise me for our anniversary the following week. Sarah sank into a chair as understanding flooded through her. The hormone levels, the way she responded to anesthesia, the cardiac complications, were all consistent with early pregnancy complications, Sebastian finished. The investigator found the pregnancy test results in her personal medical file. Positive, dated 2 days before the accident. Patricia was already pulling up medical journals on her tablet. Pregnancy changes everything about trauma treatment protocols. Drug interactions, surgical priorities, even basic vital sign interpretation. I didn't know, Sarah whispered, staring at Sebastian's rigid shoulders. If I'd known she was pregnant, I would have. You would have what? Sebastian turned finally, his face a mask of pain and anger. Chosen her over the 7-year-old boy? Let a child die to save my wife and a baby she'd just discovered she was carrying. The question hung in the air like an accusation, and Sarah realized why Sebastian had been reluctant to share this information. It didn't just exonerate her, it complicated everything. Because if she'd known about the pregnancy, the choice would have been even more impossible. One child's life against a mother and unborn baby. That's not a choice anyone should have to make, Sarah said quietly. But it's the choice you made, Sebastian replied. And now I have to live with knowing that my wife died carrying a child I never got to meet, while the woman I'm falling in love with saved someone else's child instead. The raw honesty in his voice made Sarah's chest ache. She could see the war playing out in his expression. Grief for the child he'd never known existed, guilt for surviving when Elena and their unborn baby hadn't, and something that looked like relief that Sarah's decision had been even more complex than anyone realized. "Sebastian," she said softly, "you can't blame me for not knowing something Elena hadn't told anyone. And you can't blame yourself for not knowing either." "Can I?" Sebastian's laugh was bitter. "If I'd been there that night, if I'd driven her to the gala instead of prioritizing my business call, she would have told me about the pregnancy during the drive. The doctors would have known, would have adjusted treatment accordingly. Or she would have died in the same accident, and you would have died with her," Sarah said firmly. "Sebastian, you can't rewrite history. You can only decide what to do with the truth we have now." Mrs. Chen's soft knock interrupted them again. "Mr. Cross, Miss Lily would like to hear the Dragon Princess story. She says Nanny Sarah tells it the best." Sarah looked at Sebastian, seeing the moment when personal pain collided with parental love. Whatever complicated feelings he had about Elena's pregnancy, about the choices made that night, about the woman he was falling for despite everything, Lily's need came first. "Tell her we'll be right there," Sebastian said quietly. As they walked toward the intercom system that would let Sarah read to Lily from a legally mandated distance, Patricia's phone exploded with notifications. The news cycle was accelerating. More interviews, more speculation, more public dissection of their private trauma. "There's something else," Patricia said reluctantly. "The Whitmores just filed an emergency motion claiming that your refusal to disclose Elena's pregnancy constitutes evidence of ongoing deception and cover-up. They're arguing that it proves their case about your obsessive attachment to the family." Sarah felt the trap closing around them as she realized the impossible position they were in. Every truth revealed became a weapon. Every attempt to fight back was twisted into evidence of guilt. The Whitmores weren't just seeking custody. They were systematically destroying any chance Sarah had of maintaining a relationship with the family she loved. "How did they find out about the pregnancy?" Sebastian asked, his voice sharp with suspicion. "Channel 7's investigative team," Patricia replied grimly. "They're promising a follow-up segment tomorrow night with shocking new revelations about the doctor's knowledge of the victim's condition." As they reached the intercom, Sarah realized that the media circus wasn't just covering their story. It was shaping it, turning complex medical decisions into entertainment, transforming grief and love into ratings gold. Every day they fought, every truth they revealed, fed a machine that profited from their pain. Through the intercom, Lily's small voice carried down from her bedroom. "Nanny Sarah? Are you there? I had a bad dream, and I can't remember how the princess saves herself." Sarah pressed the button with trembling fingers, knowing that this moment, reading a bedtime story through an electronic device to avoid violating a restraining order, would probably be evidence in tomorrow's court hearing. "I'm here, sweetheart," she said softly. "Once upon a time, there was a princess who lived in a tower surrounded by thorns. And even when everyone told her she was trapped, she remembered that sometimes the strongest magic is refusing to give up on the people you love." As Sarah told the story that had become their ritual, she caught Sebastian watching her with an expression that mixed admiration, desire, and something that looked like resolve. Despite everything, the legal battles, the media attention, the impossible choices that had brought them together, he was still choosing to fight for them. But Sarah could also see the cost of the fight in the shadows under his eyes, the tension in his shoulders, the way he held himself like a man bracing for the next blow. They were winning some battles and losing others, but the war was taking a toll on everyone involved. Especially Lily, who shouldn't have to hear bedtime stories through an intercom because the adults in her life couldn't protect her from their own complicated past. When the story ended and Lily's breathing had evened into sleep, Sebastian took Sarah's hand for the first time since the crisis began. "Whatever happens in court," he said quietly, "I want you to know that these 8 months with you have been the happiest Lily and I have had since Elena died. That's worth fighting for." Sarah squeezed his hand, feeling hope and dread warring in her chest. They had 48 hours until the custody hearing, and she could feel the pressure building from all sides, legal, emotional, public. But for this moment, in the quiet darkness of the house they'd turned into a home, she could almost believe that love might be stronger than manipulation. Almost. Because tomorrow would bring new revelations, new attacks, and new impossible choices. And Sarah was beginning to suspect that the Whitmores had one more devastating weapon they hadn't revealed yet. The call came at 3:47 a.m., jolting Sarah from the restless sleep she'd finally managed in the guest house. Detective Morrison's voice was tight with urgency and something that sounded like fear. "Dr. Chun, I need you to listen very carefully. Do not trust anyone. Do not go anywhere alone. And whatever you do, do not let Sebastian cross out of your sight." Sarah bolted upright, adrenaline flooding her system. "What are you talking about?" "I've been digging deeper into Elena Cross's death, and what I found." Detective Morrison's voice cracked. "Sarah, Elena's accident wasn't random. Someone wanted her dead, and you were chosen specifically to take the fall." The words hit Sarah like ice water. "That's impossible. I was assigned to her case by standard hospital protocol. Hospital protocol that was manipulated by someone with access to the scheduling system. Someone who knew Elena would be brought to that specific ER at that specific time and ensured you'd be the attending physician." Detective Morrison's breathing was rapid, panicked. "Sarah, I think I know who." The line went dead. Sarah stared at her phone, her hands shaking as she tried to call back. No answer. Straight to voicemail. She tried again, then again, each attempt met with digital silence that felt increasingly ominous. A soft knock on the guest house door made her blood freeze. Through the peephole, she could see Sebastian standing on the small porch, his hair disheveled and his expression unreadable in the pre-dawn darkness. "Sarah? I saw your light on. Are you all right?" Sarah hesitated, Detective Morrison's warning echoing in her mind. Asterisk, do not trust anyone. Do not let Sebastian cross out of your sight. Asterisk, but the man at her door was the same Sebastian who'd held her while she cried, who'd fought for her against his in-laws, who'd chosen to love her despite everything. Wasn't he? "I'm fine," she called through the door. "Just couldn't sleep." "Neither could I. Can we talk?" Against every instinct Detective Morrison had awakened, Sarah opened the door. Sebastian looked exhausted, his usual composure cracked by stress and sleepless nights. But there was something else in his expression, something that looked almost like guilt. "Who called you?" he asked, stepping into the small living room. "What? Just now. I saw you on the phone from my bedroom window. At 3:47 a.m., someone called you, and you've been trying to call them back ever since." Sebastian's eyes were sharp despite his exhaustion. "Who was it?" Sarah's mouth went dry. "How did you know I was trying to call someone back?" "Because I've been watching you, Sarah. Because I've been watching everyone since this custody battle started." Sebastian ran his hands through his hair, and for the first time since she'd known him, he looked genuinely afraid. "There are things about Elena's death that I haven't told you. Things that make this custody battle about more than just the Whitmores wanting Lily." "What things?" Sebastian walked to the window, staring out at the main house where their daughter slept, oblivious to the adult world crumbling around her. Elena was investigating something before she died. Something involving pharmaceutical companies, medical research, and systematic corruption in hospital trauma protocols. Sarah's blood chilled as pieces began clicking together. "Sebastian, what kind of research?" "The kind that involves manipulating emergency room assignments to ensure specific doctors treat specific patients. The kind that requires controlling medical outcomes for financial gain." Sebastian turned back to her, his gray eyes dark with something between fear and determination. Elena discovered that certain high-profile medical cases were being orchestrated. Accidents weren't random, doctor assignments weren't coincidental, and patient outcomes were being controlled by people with billions of dollars at stake. "That's impossible. You can't control medical emergencies. You can if you're willing to cause them." Sebastian's voice was barely a whisper. "Sarah, what if Elena's accident wasn't an accident? What if someone needed her dead to cover up what she'd discovered, and they needed a scapegoat doctor with exactly your background to take the blame?" The room seemed to tilt around Sarah as the implications crashed over her. "You're saying someone deliberately caused Elena's accident and manipulated the hospital to ensure I'd be blamed for her death?" "I'm saying Elena had been receiving death threats for weeks before the accident. I'm saying she'd gathered evidence of medical research fraud involving some of the most powerful pharmaceutical companies in the country. And I'm saying that someone with the resources to manipulate emergency room protocols would also have the resources to create false identities and manufactured job references." Sarah's legs gave out, and she sank onto the couch as understanding hit her like a freight train. "Sarah Mitchell, the nanny position, finding this job so easily when I was desperate, was exactly what someone wanted you to do." Sebastian sat beside her, his voice gentle despite the horrific implications. Sarah, I don't think you found this job. I think this job found you. How long have you known? Sarah whispered, studying Sebastian's face for any sign of deception. How long have you known that I might have been set up? Since the private investigator started digging deeper. Since I realized that your references were too perfect, your credentials too clean, your timing too convenient. Sebastian's hand reached for hers, but Sarah pulled away, suspicion crystallizing in her chest. And you didn't tell me? You let me believe I was guilty for 3 years. Let me live with that guilt while you knew I might have been framed. I wasn't sure. I needed more evidence, needed to understand who was behind it and why. Bullshit. Sarah stood, pacing the small room as fury replaced fear. You're Sebastian Cross. You have resources I can't even imagine. If you'd wanted to clear my name, you could have done it years ago. Sebastian's face went carefully blank, the expression she was beginning to recognize as his tell when he was hiding something important. Sarah, it's not that simple. Then make it simple. Sarah's voice cracked with rage and betrayal. Tell me the truth, Sebastian. All of it. Because right now, I'm starting to wonder if Detective Morrison was right to warn me not to trust anyone. Detective Morrison called you? Sebastian's voice sharpened with something that looked like panic. What did she say? She said Elena's death wasn't random. She said I was chosen to take the fall. She said someone wanted Elena dead, and... Sarah stopped, a terrible thought occurring to her. She said not to trust anyone, and specifically not to let you out of my sight. Sebastian's face went white. Sarah, you don't understand. Then help me understand. Sarah pulled out her phone, showing him the missed calls to Detective Morrison. She was about to tell me who orchestrated Elena's death when the line went dead. And now she's not answering. So either something's happened to her, or what? Sarah stared at the man she'd fallen in love with, seeing him clearly for the first time in 8 months. Or the person she was about to name is someone who doesn't want that information getting out. The silence stretched between them, heavy with suspicion and the weight of unasked questions. Finally, Sebastian spoke, his voice hollow with defeat. Sarah, I need you to know that everything I've felt for you, every moment we've shared, has been real. Whatever else happens, whatever you learn about me or my family or this situation, that's the truth. What am I going to learn, Sebastian? Sebastian walked to the guest house door, his hand on the handle as if preparing to run. You're going to learn that my family's pharmaceutical investments include companies that fund medical research. You're going to learn that Elena discovered irregularities in that research, specifically involving trauma protocols and emergency room procedures. Sarah's stomach dropped as more pieces clicked into place. You're going to learn that the Cross Foundation has financial ties to the same companies Elena was investigating when she died. Sebastian, no. You're going to learn that I knew who you were before I hired you, that I specifically sought you out because you were the doctor who treated Elena. Sebastian's voice was breaking with each confession. And you're going to learn that I've been lying to you about my motives for 8 months. The betrayal hit Sarah like a physical blow. You've known who I was the entire time? Yes. You hired me specifically because I was Elena's doctor? Yes. Our entire relationship has been built on manipulation? Sebastian turned back to her, tears running down his cheeks. No. That's the one thing that wasn't planned, Sarah. Falling in love with you wasn't part of anyone's design. It was the one real thing in a web of lies, and it's the thing that's going to destroy everything. Destroy what? What haven't you told me? Before Sebastian could answer, the guest house windows exploded inward in a shower of glass and smoke. Armed figures poured through the breach with military precision, their faces covered, their weapons trained on both Sarah and Sebastian. Dr. Sarah Chun, a distorted voice called through a megaphone. You're coming with us. Mr. Cross, you have 30 seconds to decide whether you're part of the solution or part of the problem. Sarah's world tilted as she realized that whatever conspiracy had killed Elena was far from over. And the man she loved, the man who'd just confessed to 8 months of manipulation, was somehow at the center of it all. As zip ties cut into her wrists and a black hood descended over her head, Sarah heard Sebastian's voice, desperate and broken. Sarah, I'm sorry. For everything. But you have to believe me. This wasn't supposed to happen. You were supposed to be safe. The last thing Sarah heard before consciousness faded was the sound of Sebastian screaming her name as they dragged her away from the only home she'd known since Elena Cross died in her hands 3 years ago. When she woke, she was alone in a sterile white room that looked disturbingly like a hospital, with no idea whether Sebastian had tried to save her or had been part of handing her over to people who clearly meant her harm. The man she'd trusted with her heart had been lying to her for 8 months. The family she'd fought to protect might never have been hers to begin with. And somewhere in the darkness of her captivity, Sarah realized that Detective Morrison's warning had come too late. She'd already trusted the wrong person. Sarah woke to the sound of classical music, Mozart's Requiem playing softly through speakers she couldn't see. The irony wasn't lost on her. She was strapped to a hospital gurney in what appeared to be a private medical facility, for lines snaking from her arms to machines that monitored her vital signs with clinical precision. "Good, you're awake." The voice belonged to a woman Sarah didn't recognize, mid-50s, expensively dressed, with the kind of calm authority that came from being accustomed to absolute power. "I was beginning to worry the sedative dosage was too high. We need you lucid for what comes next." Sarah tried to speak, but found her throat raw and dry. The woman, Dr. Margaret Sinclair, according to the ID badge clipped to her pristine white coat, offered her water through a straw with the gentle efficiency of someone who'd done this many times before. "Where am I?" Sarah managed. "Sinclair Medical Research Institute, a private facility where we conduct studies that the FDA would find ethically challenging." Dr. Sinclair checked Sarah's 4 lines with professional competence. "You've been unconscious for 18 hours. Long enough for us to run some preliminary tests, establish your baseline medical status, and prepare for the procedure." "What procedure?" Dr. Sinclair smiled with the kind of cold warmth that made Sarah's skin crawl. "The procedure that's going to make you forget this entire nightmare, Dr. Chin. Targeted memory modification. We'll remove everything from the night Elena Cross died through yesterday morning. You'll wake up as Sarah Mitchell again, with carefully implanted memories of a peaceful life working as a nanny for a lovely family who sadly no longer needs your services." Sarah's blood turned to ice as the full horror of her situation became clear. "You're going to lobotomize me." Such a crude term. "We prefer selective memory restructuring. You'll retain your essential personality, your skills, your ability to function. You just won't remember anything inconvenient about pharmaceutical conspiracies, manipulated medical outcomes, or the Cross family." Through the medical facility's windows, Sarah could see a parking lot surrounded by high fences topped with razor wire. Beyond that, forests stretched to the horizon. They were somewhere remote, somewhere no one would think to look for her. "The Whitmores," Sarah said, pieces clicking together. "This is all connected to the custody battle. The Whitmores are useful pawns, nothing more. Harold's judicial connections help us navigate legal complications. Margaret's hospital board position provides access to medical records." Dr. Sinclair consulted a chart with the dispassionate interest of someone discussing livestock. "But they're not the architects of this particular operation." "Then who is?" The medical facility's main door opened, and Sarah's breath caught as Sebastian walked in, followed by 2 men in expensive suits. For a moment, hope flared in her chest. He'd come to rescue her, had tracked her down, was here to save her from whatever nightmare she'd stumbled into. Then she saw his expression. Sebastian looked at her with the cold assessment of someone evaluating a business problem, not the warmth of a man who'd claimed to love her. The transformation was so complete that Sarah wondered if she'd ever really known him at all. "How is she responding to the preparatory medications?" Sebastian asked Dr. Sinclair, his voice clinical and detached. "Excellent vital stability. The memory modification procedure can proceed on schedule." Dr. Sinclair made notes on her chart. "She'll be ready for memory implantation within 6 hours." Sarah stared at Sebastian, feeling the last pieces of her shattered world crumble into dust. "You're behind this." "All of it. I'm behind protecting my daughter from a woman who's become dangerously obsessed with replacing her dead mother," Sebastian replied, his voice carrying none of the tenderness she'd grown to love. "I'm behind ensuring that certain medical research continues without interference from idealistic doctors who don't understand the bigger picture." "What bigger picture?" Sarah demanded, though she was beginning to suspect she already knew. One of the men in suits stepped forward, Dr. Richard Vance, according to his credentials, CEO of Vance Pharmaceutical Industries. "The bigger picture is that medical progress requires sacrifice, Dr. Chin. Elena Cross discovered research protocols that have saved thousands of lives by testing experimental treatments on terminal patients who were going to die anyway." "You've been killing people," Sarah whispered. "We've been accelerating natural outcomes for the greater good," Dr. Vance corrected. Elena's investigation threatened to expose research that will eventually cure cancer, eliminate Alzheimer's, and extend human lifespan by decades. Her moral squeamishness would have cost millions of lives. Sarah looked between the three of them. Dr. Sinclair preparing instruments with surgical precision, Dr. Vance explaining atrocities like they were business decisions, and Sebastian watching it all with the detached interest of someone who'd orchestrated every moment. And my role in all this? You were the perfect scapegoat, Sebastian said with clinical honesty. A young doctor with the right background, the right vulnerabilities, the right guilt profile to accept blame for Elena's death without fighting back too hard. We monitored you for 3 years, waiting for the right moment to bring you into Lily's life. Why? Why not just leave me alone? Because Elena had shared her research with someone before she died, Dr. Sinclair said, adjusting the 4 medication that was keeping Sarah docile. We needed to know what she'd discovered, who she'd contacted, what evidence existed. Having you close to the family gave us access to Elena's personal files, her computer, her private correspondence. Sarah's mind raced despite the medication fog. You used me to search Elena's belongings. You used yourself, Sebastian corrected. Do you remember reorganizing Elena's office 3 months ago? Going through her computer files to create a photo album for Lily? Helping me sort through boxes of her personal papers. The memories came flooding back. Hours spent in Elena's home office, carefully cataloging her wife's belongings, thinking she was helping a grieving family heal. Instead, she'd been unwittingly providing access to the evidence Elena had gathered about pharmaceutical corruption. The photo album, Sarah whispered. The files I copied to create it contained Elena's complete research into medical protocol manipulation, Dr. Vance confirmed. Research that would have destroyed 3 pharmaceutical companies and exposed systematic human experimentation across dozens of hospitals. You destroyed it. We contained it, Sebastian said. And now we're going to contain you. Sarah tested the restraints holding her to the gurney, but the leather straps were professional grade, designed to hold struggling patients during medical procedures. Her phone was gone, her communication with the outside world severed, her location unknown to anyone who might try to find her. What about Lily? She asked desperately. What happens to her? For the first time since entering the facility, Sebastian's mask slipped slightly. Lily will be fine. She'll have new caregivers, people who understand their role and don't develop inappropriate attachments. Inappropriate attachments? Sarah's voice cracked with rage. I love that little girl like she's my own daughter. Which is exactly the problem, Dr. Sinclair said, checking the monitors that tracked Sarah's vital signs. Excessive emotional attachment makes you unpredictable, Dr. Chen. It makes you willing to sacrifice everything for the illusion of family connection. It's not an illusion. It is, Sebastian interrupted, his voice cutting through her protests like a scalpel. Everything you've experienced for the past 8 months has been carefully constructed, Sarah. The bonding with Lily, the growing attraction between us, even your sense of belonging in our family, all of it was designed to make you compliant and useful. The words hit Sarah like physical blows, each one designed to strip away another layer of hope and self-worth. But even as her heart shattered, her mind was working, cataloging details, looking for weaknesses in their seemingly perfect plan. The custody battle, she said slowly. The Whitmores, the media attention, the emergency hearing, provided excellent cover for your disappearance, Dr. Vance confirmed. By the time anyone realizes you're missing, you'll have already undergone memory modification and been relocated to a new identity in another state. Sarah Mitchell will simply vanish, and Dr. Sarah Chun will have no memory of ever existing. And if someone comes looking for me, who would? Sebastian asked with cruel precision. You have no family, no close friends outside of Jessica, who believes you've gone into hiding to avoid the media circus. The only people who cared about Sarah Mitchell were Lily and myself, and will have moved on to more appropriate arrangements. Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the weight of complete isolation crushing down on her. Sebastian was right. She'd spent 3 years running from her old life and 8 months living a borrowed one. There was no one to miss her, no one to notice her absence, no one to fight for her freedom. Except Detective Morrison, Sarah said, opening her eyes to meet Sebastian's gaze. She was investigating Elena's death. She knew about the conspiracy. Detective Morrison had a car accident this morning, Dr. Sinclair said with clinical detachment. Tragic brake failure on a mountain road. She's in intensive care at Seattle General, and the doctors aren't optimistic about her recovery. Another piece of Sarah's world crumbled as she realized the full scope of their reach. These people didn't just manipulate medical outcomes. They eliminated anyone who threatened their operations. "How many people have you killed?" Sarah whispered. "How many lives have we saved through research that wouldn't have been possible without our methods?" Dr. Vance countered. "Elena's death led to breakthroughs in trauma treatment that have saved hundreds of emergency room patients. Detective Morrison's investigation would have ended research that will cure childhood leukemia within 5 years." "You're monsters." "We're pragmatists," Sebastian said, checking his watch with the efficiency of someone on a tight schedule. "Dr. Sinclair, how much longer until the procedure can begin?" 4 hours for final preparation. The memory modification itself takes approximately 2 hours, followed by 6 hours of recovery before we can safely transport her to the relocation facility. Sebastian nodded, then looked down at Sarah with something that might have been regret. "For what it's worth, the feelings I developed for you weren't entirely fabricated. You're an extraordinary woman, Dr. Chun. In another life, under different circumstances, we might have had something real." "We did have something real," Sarah said, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Or I thought we did. I thought you loved me. I thought Lily loved me." "Lily does love you," Sebastian admitted, his voice softening slightly. "That's why this has to end. Her attachment to you has become problematic, interfering with the psychological conditioning we need to implement for her future role." "What future role?" "Lily's genetic profile makes her an ideal candidate for advanced pharmaceutical testing as she matures. With proper conditioning from childhood, she'll willingly participate in research that will benefit humanity while ensuring our continued access to willing test subjects." The horror of it hit Sarah like a tidal wave. "You're going to experiment on your own daughter." "I'm going to ensure that my daughter contributes to medical advancement instead of growing up to be another obstacle like her mother," Sebastian corrected. "Elena's moral absolutes would have condemned millions of people to preventable deaths. I won't let Lily make the same mistake." Sarah stared at the man she'd loved, seeing him clearly for the first time. Not a grieving widower learning to love again, but a calculating monster who'd used his own daughter's affection as a weapon against the woman he'd manipulated into caring for them both. "Please," Sarah whispered, making one last desperate appeal to whatever humanity might remain in Sebastian Cross. "Don't do this to Lily. Whatever you do to me, don't turn that beautiful little girl into a test subject. She deserves better than that." Sebastian's expression hardened back into cold professionalism. "Dr. Sinclair, increase the sedative dosage." Dr. Chen seems to be building resistance to the current levels. As medication flooded Sarah's system, making her thoughts sluggish and her vision blurry, she realized that she'd lost everything. Her identity, her freedom, her family, and now her memory of all of it. In a few hours, she would wake up as someone else, with no recollection of the little girl who'd called her Nanny Sarah, or the man who'd taught her that love could bloom even in the aftermath of tragedy. The last thing Sarah saw before consciousness faded was Sebastian's face, watching her with the clinical interest of someone observing a necessary but unpleasant medical procedure. The last thing she heard was Lily's voice, echoing from some impossible distance. "Nanny Sarah? Where are you? I need you to tell me how the princess saves herself." But this time, Sarah had no answer. Because some princesses don't get to save themselves. Some princesses just disappear. The medical facility's emergency alarm system screamed through the corridors at 3:17 a.m., red warning lights strobing across the sterile walls like a digital heartbeat. Sarah forced her eyes open through the medication haze, her mind struggling to process the chaos erupting around her. "What's happening?" Dr. Sinclair demanded, rushing to check the monitoring equipment as armed security guards ran past the observation window. "Perimeter breach," one of the guards shouted. "Multiple vehicles, armed personnel. They're heading for the main building." Sebastian appeared in the doorway, his composed mask finally cracking to reveal genuine panic. "How is that possible? This location is classified beyond top secret." "Sir, you need to see this," another guard called from the hallway, holding up a tablet. "They're broadcasting on emergency medical frequencies. Someone's calling for Dr. Sarah Chen specifically." Sarah's heart leaped as a familiar voice crackled through the guard's radio. "Dr. Chen, if you can hear this, we're coming. Jessica Martinez, Seattle PD backup units, and some very angry federal agents who want to discuss pharmaceutical fraud with your captors." Jessica, Sarah's best friend. the one person she'd underestimated, the one person who'd never stopped looking for her despite the elaborate cover story about going into hiding. Through the medication fog, Sarah felt something she hadn't experienced in hours. Hope. "That's impossible," Dr. Vance snarled, appearing beside Sebastian. "How could they have tracked her here?" Sebastian's phone buzzed with an incoming call. He answered with sharp efficiency, but Sarah could see his face go pale as he listened to whoever was on the other end. "Yes, I understand," Sebastian said into the phone, his voice tight with controlled panic. "No, the procedure hasn't been completed yet." "I see. Yes, we'll implement Protocol 7 immediately." He hung up and turned to Dr. Sinclair with the expression of a man whose carefully constructed world was collapsing. "Corporate wants her eliminated. No memory modification, no relocation. Clean termination and cremation within the hour." "Sebastian, no," Dr. Sinclair protested. "We need her alive for the final phase of Elena's research extraction. There are still gaps in what we recovered from. There are federal agents at our perimeter." Sebastian's voice cracked with fury. Dr. Chen has somehow become a liability that threatens the entire operation. Corporate doesn't care about Elena's research anymore. They care about damage control. Sarah realized with crystalline clarity that she was about to be murdered, her body incinerated to eliminate evidence of a conspiracy that had already consumed too many lives. But for the first time in 8 months, she also realized something else. She wasn't powerless. She was Dr. Sarah Chen, a physician who'd saved lives under impossible pressure, who'd made split-second decisions in trauma situations, who'd survived 3 years of exile and 8 months of manipulation without losing the core of who she was. And she was done being anyone's victim. "Dr. Sinclair," Sarah said quietly, her voice cutting through the chaos with medical authority, "you should check my 4-line. I think there's been a medication error." Dr. Sinclair glanced at the monitors, then frowned as she noticed what Sarah had hoped she would. The sedative levels in Sarah's bloodstream were dropping faster than medically possible. "How are you metabolizing the medication so quickly?" Dr. Sinclair demanded, moving closer to examine the foresight. "Because I've been building resistance to it for the past 6 hours, Sarah replied, using the doctor's momentary distraction to test the restraints she'd been working to loosen since regaining consciousness. "And because you made a critical error in your patient assessment." "What error?" Sarah's hand slipped free from the loosened restraint with surgical precision. "You assumed I was a victim instead of a doctor." Before Dr. Sinclair could react, Sarah grabbed the 4-pole and swung it with the desperate strength of someone fighting for her life. The metal connected with Dr. Sinclair's temple, dropping her to the floor as alarms continued to wail throughout the facility. "Security!" Sebastian shouted, but his guards were already running toward whatever was happening at the perimeter. The facility's careful order was dissolving into chaos as Jessica's rescue attempt created exactly the distraction Sarah needed. Sarah worked quickly to free her other restraints, her medical training taking over as she assessed her situation. Unknown medications still in her system, facility in lockdown, armed personnel throughout the building, and somewhere in the distance, people who were trying to save her. But first she had something to do. "Sebastian," she said, standing on unsteady legs as she faced the man who'd orchestrated her destruction. "I need you to know something before this ends." "Sarah, don't do anything stupid. The building is surrounded by my security team." "Your security team is busy with federal agents," Sarah interrupted, moving toward Dr. Sinclair's medical bag with purpose. "And I'm not Sarah anymore. I'm Dr. Chen, and I remember exactly what happened the night Elena died." Sebastian's face went white as Sarah pulled a syringe from the medical supplies, her hands steady despite everything she'd endured. "What are you doing?" "I'm giving you a choice," Sarah said, filling the syringe with medication from Dr. Sinclair's supply. "The same kind of choice you've been forcing on people for years." "Sarah, please. Elena didn't discover your research by accident, did she?" Sarah advanced slowly, the syringe held with medical precision. "She was investigating because she suspected you were involved in something terrible. Her own husband, funding experiments on terminal patients. You don't understand the bigger picture. I understand that you killed your wife when she threatened to expose you. I understand that you've been using Lily as leverage to control me. And I understand that you're planning to turn a 5-year-old girl into a test subject." Sarah's voice was deadly calm, the voice of someone who'd made an irrevocable decision. "So here's your choice, Sebastian. This syringe contains the same memory modification drugs you were planning to use on me." Sebastian backed toward the door, but Sarah could hear gunfire in the corridors. His escape routes were being systematically eliminated by whatever force Jessica had brought with her. You can inject yourself with this medication and forget everything about your pharmaceutical conspiracy, Sarah continued. Forget about using Lily for experiments. Forget about Elena's research. Forget about manipulating families for profit. Wake up as just a father who wants to protect his daughter. And if I refuse? Sarah's smile was sharp with 3 years of accumulated rage. Then I inject you anyway, but with something that will leave you conscious and aware while I call Jessica and tell her exactly where to find Lily and all the evidence Elena gathered before you killed her. You're bluffing. You took an oath to do no harm. I took an oath to protect patients from people like you, Sarah corrected. And that includes protecting a 5-year-old girl from her own father. The facility's main door exploded inward with military precision, and Jessica's voice echoed through the corridors. Sarah, where are you? Here. Sarah called back, never taking her eyes off Sebastian. And I have someone the FBI is going to want to talk to. Sebastian looked between the syringe in Sarah's hand and the approaching sounds of his empire being dismantled by federal agents. You don't know what you're doing. The research we've conducted has saved thousands of lives, by sacrificing hundreds of others without their consent. Sarah moved closer, her medical training allowing her to read Sebastian's vital signs. Elevated heart rate, dilated pupils, the physiological markers of someone in full panic. Including Elena. Including Detective Morrison. Including how many others? Sarah, if you do this, if you destroy everything we've built, millions of people will die from diseases we could have cured. Then we'll cure them the right way. Through ethical research, informed consent, and medical protocols that don't require murdering whistleblowers. Sarah raised the syringe, her hand steady with the conviction of someone who'd finally found her moral center. Your choice, Sebastian. Forget willingly or forget anyway. For a moment, Sebastian looked like he might fight, might try to overpower her or appeal to whatever feelings she'd once had for him. Then his shoulders sagged with the defeat of someone whose careful plans had finally collapsed beyond repair. If I take the medication, he said quietly, what happens to Lily? Lily goes to people who will love her for who she is, not what she can contribute to medical research, Sarah replied. Lily gets to grow up as a normal little girl who reads princess stories and believes in happy endings. And you? Sarah considered the question, thinking about the life she'd built as Sarah Mitchell, the identity she'd hidden behind for 3 years, the family she'd found in the aftermath of Elena's death. All of it built on lies and manipulation, but containing moments of genuine love that had made her human again. I stop running from who I am, she said finally. I go back to being Dr. Sarah Chun, and I make sure that what happened to Elena never happens to anyone else. Sebastian held out his hand for the syringe, his expression a mixture of defeat and something that might have been relief. For what it's worth, Sarah, the love I felt for you was real. It was the one thing in this entire nightmare that wasn't part of the plan. I know, Sarah said, handing him the syringe. That's why I'm giving you the chance to forget it all and start over. As Sebastian injected himself with the memory modification drugs, as Jessica's voice grew closer in the corridors, as federal agents systematically dismantled the conspiracy that had consumed so many lives, Sarah realized that she'd finally made the choice that defined who she really was. Not a victim of circumstances beyond her control. Not a weapon in someone else's war. But a doctor who'd sworn to protect life, even when it meant sacrificing her own happiness. The impossible choice was over. And Dr. Sarah Chun had chosen to save everyone she could, including the man who'd tried to destroy her. The federal agents who flooded into the medical facility moved with the precision of people who'd been planning this operation for years, not hours. Sarah watched through the observation window as Jessica directed teams toward specific locations, as if she knew exactly where to find evidence, exactly which files to seize, exactly who to arrest. How did you know where to look? Sarah asked as Jessica helped her out of the medical restraints, her best friend's face a mixture of relief and grim satisfaction. Because I've been working with someone who's been tracking this conspiracy for 3 years, Jessica replied, pulling out a tablet that showed architectural plans of the facility. Someone who knew this day would come and prepared for it. Before Sarah could ask who, Detective Morrison appeared in the doorway, very much alive despite reports of her car accident, and wearing an FBI tactical vest instead of a hospital gown. Dr. Chun, Detective Morrison said with a smile that transformed her entire face. I'm sorry for the deception. but we needed the pharmaceutical network to believe I was neutralized while we moved our final pieces into place. Sarah stared at the detective she'd thought was dead, her mind reeling from yet another revelation in a day full of impossible truths. You faked your own accident? With help from someone who'd been planning this operation since the night Elena Cross died. Detective Morrison gestured toward the hallway, where a figure Sarah didn't recognize was coordinating the evidence collection with military efficiency. Dr. Alexander Reeves stepped into the room, and Sarah's breath caught as she saw Elena Cross's face and an older woman's features. The same intelligent eyes, the same determined chin, the same aura of someone who refused to accept injustice. Elena's mother, Sarah whispered. Elena's real mother, Dr. Reeves corrected, her voice carrying decades of controlled fury. Not Margaret Whitmore, who adopted Elena as a child for reasons that had nothing to do with maternal love. Sarah felt the world tilt again as another layer of deception revealed itself. What are you talking about? I'm talking about the fact that Elena Cross was born Alexandra Elena Reeves, the daughter of a pharmaceutical researcher who discovered massive corruption in medical testing protocols 30 years ago. Dr. Reeves pulled out a file thick with documentation. I'm talking about the fact that Margaret and Harold Whitmore adopted Elena specifically to keep her close to their operation, to monitor her for signs that she might follow in her biological mother's footsteps. The implications crashed over Sarah like a tsunami. Elena was adopted to be controlled. Elena was adopted to be a failsafe, Detective Morrison corrected. If she ever discovered the truth about pharmaceutical corruption, the Whitmores would be positioned to neutralize her before she could expose them. Just like they neutralized me. Except Elena was smarter than they gave her credit for, Dr. Reeves continued, her voice thick with pride and grief. When she realized what her adoptive parents were involved in, she contacted me. We spent 2 years gathering evidence, building cases, preparing for the day when we could expose the entire network. Sarah looked between the three women, seeing a conspiracy within a conspiracy, a plan that had been years in the making. But Elena died before you could expose them. Elena died because she discovered something that changed everything, Dr. Reeves said, opening the file to reveal documents that made Sarah's vision blur. She discovered that Sebastian wasn't just funding pharmaceutical research, he was being blackmailed into it. The room went silent except for the distant sounds of arrests being made throughout the facility. Sarah stared at the documents showing financial records, threatening communications, and photographs that painted a picture she'd never imagined. What do you mean blackmailed? Sebastian Cross's first wife, his college girlfriend who died in what was ruled a suicide, was actually murdered by the same pharmaceutical network that killed Elena, Jessica said quietly. They've been holding that over Sebastian for 15 years, forcing him to fund their research and provide access to his medical foundations. Sarah's legs gave out, and she sank into a chair as understanding crashed over her. Sebastian wasn't the mastermind. He was another victim. A victim who made terrible choices to protect his daughter, Dr. Reeves confirmed. When Lily was born, the pharmaceutical network made it clear that she would meet the same fate as her father's first wife if Sebastian didn't cooperate completely. But that doesn't excuse what he did to me, Sarah said, anger flaring through her confusion. He manipulated me, lied to me, put me through hell. Because he was trying to save your life, Detective Morrison interrupted. Dr. Chun, Sebastian Cross has been working with us for the past 6 months. Every lie he told you, every manipulation, every moment of seeming betrayal, it was all designed to keep you alive long enough for us to expose the real conspiracy. The words hit Sarah like physical blows. That's impossible. He was going to let them erase my memory. He was buying time, Jessica said gently. The memory modification drugs in that facility are saline solutions, Sarah. Sebastian replaced them 3 weeks ago when we realized the pharmaceutical network was planning to eliminate you entirely. Sarah stared at her best friend, her mind struggling to process this newest revelation. You've been working together? All of you. Since the night Elena died, Dr. Reeves confirmed. Elena's death triggered a dead man switch that sent evidence files to me, Detective Morrison, and 3 federal agencies. But we needed someone inside the pharmaceutical network to help us identify all the players. Sebastian volunteered, Detective Morrison added. Even though it meant putting himself and Lily at risk, even though it meant deceiving you for months, even though it meant watching you hate him for choices he was forced to make. Through the facility's windows, Sarah could see Sebastian being led away in handcuffs, but not by hostile guards. by federal agents who were clearly protecting him rather than arresting him, moving him away from a building full of evidence that would destroy the people who'd been controlling his life for 15 years. Where are they taking him? Sarah asked. Safe house along with Lily, Jessica replied. The memory modification drugs he took tonight weren't the ones you gave him, Sarah. We switched them out while you were confronting him. Sebastian is going to remember everything, including the fact that he's been in love with a woman who saved his daughter's life by being brave enough to fight for the truth. Sarah felt tears streaming down her cheeks as the full scope of the deception revealed itself. Not the cruel manipulation she'd believed, but an elaborate protection scheme designed to keep her alive while justice slowly assembled around the people who'd destroyed so many lives. Elena's research, Sarah whispered. What did she really discover? Dr. Reeves smiled with fierce satisfaction. Elena discovered that the pharmaceutical network wasn't just conducting illegal experiments. They were preparing to release a manufactured pandemic that would require their experimental treatments to survive. The horror of it hit Sarah like a physical blow. They were going to kill millions of people to create a market for their cures. And tonight we stopped them, Detective Morrison said, holding up her phone to show news alerts flooding in from around the world. Simultaneous raids in 17 countries, hundreds of arrests, research facilities shut down from Seattle to Switzerland. All because Elena Cross spent 2 years building a case that would activate the moment someone tried to silence her permanently, Dr. Reeves added. All because you were brave enough to stay and fight instead of running when things got difficult. Sarah looked around at the women who'd orchestrated the most complex justice operation she could imagine, Jessica, who'd pretended to be a helpless best friend while actually coordinating federal investigations, Detective Morrison, who'd faked her own death to move freely through the conspiracy, Dr. Reeves, who'd spent 30 years waiting for the chance to avenge her daughter's death. What happens now? Sarah asked. Now you get to choose who you want to be, Jessica said with a smile that contained years of friendship and support. Dr. Sarah Chun, who saved a child's life under impossible pressure and then saved thousands more by refusing to stay silent about medical corruption. Or Sarah Mitchell, who found a family worth fighting for and discovered that love can survive even the most elaborate deception, Detective Morrison added. Or, Dr. Reeves said with the wisdom of someone who'd learned to rebuild life from tragedy, you can be both. You can be the doctor who saves lives and the woman who loves a man brave enough to sacrifice everything to protect his daughter and the woman he fell in love with despite knowing it could cost him everything. Through the facility's windows, Sarah could see the dawn breaking over the forest that surrounded their prison. Somewhere in that growing light, Sebastian and Lily were safe for the first time in years. Somewhere in that light, justice was finally being served to people who'd profited from suffering. And somewhere in that light, Sarah Chin was free to choose her own future for the first time since the night Elena Cross died in her hands. I want to see them, Sarah said finally. Sebastian and Lily. I want to know if what we had was real, or if I just imagined it all. What you had was real, Dr. Reeves said with the certainty of someone who'd watched love survive impossible circumstances. Everything else was performance, but the love was real. As they walked out of the medical facility that had been designed to erase her memory, Sarah realized that the greatest victory wasn't exposing the pharmaceutical conspiracy or saving Lily from a future as a test subject or even clearing her own name from Elena's death. The greatest victory was learning that love, real, honest, transformative love, could survive deception, manipulation, and even the kind of systematic evil that turned healing into harm. Elena Cross had died to expose the truth. Sarah Chun had lived to make sure that truth changed everything. And love had been the weapon that destroyed the conspiracy and the reward that made survival worthwhile. 6 months later, Sarah stood in the kitchen of Sebastian's house, their house, watching Lily practice reading from a medical journal with the same intensity she'd once brought to princess stories. The 8-year-old had developed a fascination with Nanny Sarah's doctor work that both delighted and terrified her parents. Traumatic brain injury, Lily sounded out carefully, then looked up with Elena's intelligent eyes. That means someone got hurt in their head, right? Right, Sarah confirmed, setting down the coffee she'd been making for Sebastian. But remember what we talked about. Medicine is about helping people heal, not just learning about injuries. I know. That's why I want to be a doctor like you when I grow up. So I can help people too. Lily turned the page with careful reverence for the heavy textbook. Daddy says you saved a little boy the night Mommy went to heaven. Sarah's chest tightened with the familiar ache that came whenever Lily mentioned Elena. They'd told her the truth about that night, an age-appropriate version that explained how sometimes doctors have to make very hard choices, and how her first mommy had been proud that Sarah chose to save another child's life. "I did what I thought was right," Sarah said. The same answer she'd given in congressional testimony, medical board hearings, and the book interviews that had made her an accidental spokesperson for medical ethics reform. "And that's why you're both my mommies," Lily said with 8-year-old logic that cut straight to the heart of things. "Birth mommy gave me life, and you saved my life by staying to take care of me." The kitchen door opened, and Sebastian entered with the quiet confidence that had replaced his previous calculating demeanor. The memory modification drugs had been replaced with therapy, months of working through the trauma of 15 years of blackmail, the guilt of choices he'd been forced to make, and the fear that he'd lost the woman he loved through necessary deceptions. "How are my girls doing?" Sebastian asked, and Sarah's heart still fluttered at the casual possessiveness in his voice. But now she knew it was real, earned through months of rebuilding trust rather than manufactured for manipulation. "We're practicing medical terminology," Lily announced, "and planning our wedding." "Your wedding?" Sebastian raised an eyebrow as he slipped his arms around Sarah's waist from behind, a gesture that had become natural again after months of careful reconstruction. "Not mine, silly. Yours and Nanny Sarah's." Lily rolled her eyes with the exasperation of someone explaining the obvious to dense adults. "You proposed last month, remember? I helped pick out the ring." Sarah held up her left hand, admiring the simple solitaire that Sebastian had presented to her on Christmas morning. Not in the grand gesture of a man trying to manipulate her emotions, but with the quiet certainty of someone who'd proven his love through actions rather than words. "The wedding is next Saturday," Sebastian murmured against her ear, his breath warm with promise. "Are you nervous? About marrying you?" "No." Sarah leaned back against his chest, feeling the solid reality of a love that had survived deception, conspiracy, and the kind of systematic evil that destroyed other families. "About the guest list?" "Absolutely. The wedding would be small, family, and the tight circle of people who'd helped expose the pharmaceutical conspiracy. Dr. Reeves, who'd become the grandmother Lily had never known she was missing. Detective Morrison, who'd accepted a position heading the new Federal Medical Crimes Task Force. Jessica, who'd parlayed her experience into a victims' rights advocacy organization. And conspicuously absent would be Harold and Margaret Whitmore, currently serving federal sentences for their role in medical fraud and conspiracy to commit murder. "The background check came back," Sebastian said, echoing the words that had started their journey 8 months ago, but now his voice carried warmth instead of deception. "Oh!" Sarah turned in his arms, noting the small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Sarah Chin, age 31, licensed physician, Congressional Medal recipient for medical ethics advocacy, best-selling author, and... Sebastian's smile widened. Future wife of someone who spent the last 6 months proving he's worthy of her trust. "And what does this background check say about your prospects, Mr. Cross?" "It says," Sebastian replied, pulling out an official-looking document, "that Sebastian Cross has been cleared of all charges related to pharmaceutical conspiracy, has voluntarily surrendered all questionable research funding, and has established the Elena Cross Foundation for Medical Ethics with an initial endowment of $50 million. Sarah took the document, seeing the federal seal that marked the end of a legal process that had dominated their lives for months. "It's really over?" "The criminal cases are over. The civil suits will take years to resolve. But yes, we're free to build whatever life we want together." Lily looked up from her medical journal with the timing of someone who'd been listening to every word. "Does this mean we can have a normal family now? With normal problems like whose turn it is to do dishes instead of whether bad people are going to hurt us?" Sarah and Sebastian exchanged a look over Lily's head. Two people who'd learned that normal was a luxury earned through surviving the abnormal together. "I think we can manage some very normal problems," Sarah said, settling at the kitchen table beside Lily. "In fact, I have a normal problem right now." "What's that?" Lily asked, clearly delighted by the prospect of ordinary difficulties. "I need to figure out what to wear to marry your daddy, and I have absolutely no idea." Lily's face lit up with the joy of someone being consulted on crucially important matters. "I have ideas. Birth mommy left some pretty things in her closet that daddy saved for when I get older, but maybe she'd want you to wear something of hers," Sebastian finished softly. "Elena would have loved you, Sarah." She would have been proud that you took such good care of our daughter when I couldn't. The simple truth of it settled over them like a blessing. Elena Cross had died fighting for medical justice, but her death had ultimately led to the exposure of systematic corruption that would save thousands of lives. Her daughter was growing up loved and protected, raised by people who understood the value of both truth and forgiveness. There's something else, Sebastian said, pulling out another envelope with the careful timing of someone who'd planned this moment. A letter from Dr. Harrison. Sarah's stomach tightened at the name of her former supervisor, the man whose testimony had originally destroyed her career. What does he want? To offer you his job. Seattle General is creating a new position, Director of Emergency Medicine Ethics, and they want someone with your experience to oversee trauma protocols and ensure that what happened to Elena never happens to anyone else. Sarah stared at the letter, seeing her career coming full circle in a way she'd never imagined possible. They want me to run the department where Elena died? They want you to transform it into a place where other doctors won't face the impossible choices you faced, Sebastian corrected. They want you to make sure that emergency medicine serves patients instead of pharmaceutical profits. Would we have to move back to Seattle? Only if you want the job. I can run the Cross Foundation from anywhere, and Lily's homeschooling is portable. Sebastian sat beside her, his hand finding hers with the easy intimacy of two people who'd learned to navigate difficult decisions together. But I want you to choose based on what feels right to you, not on what's convenient for us. Sarah looked around the kitchen where she'd read bedtime stories through an intercom, where she'd learned that love could survive even elaborate deceptions, where she'd found the family she'd been searching for her entire adult life. I want to take the job, she said finally. Not to go backward, but to make sure other families don't have to go through what we did. Even if it means working in the same hospital where you lost Elena, especially because it means working in the same hospital where I lost Elena. Sarah's voice carried the strength of someone who'd learned to transform guilt into purpose. Elena died fighting for medical justice. I want to finish what she started. Lily looked up from wedding planning notes with the solemn wisdom that sometimes surfaced in children who'd experienced too much adult complexity too early. Birth mommy would like that, wouldn't she? You taking care of other people the way you took care of me. Yes, sweetheart, Sarah said, feeling tears threaten at the simple truth of an 8-year-old's understanding. I think she would. Sebastian's phone buzzed with a familiar pattern, 3 short bursts that he'd programmed for Elena's mother. Dr. Reeves had become a regular presence in their lives, filling the grandmother role with the fierce love of someone making up for lost time. She wants to know if we've decided on flowers for the wedding, Sebastian said, reading the text with amusement. Apparently lilies are too obvious and roses are too traditional. What does she suggest? Sarah asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. Sunflowers. Elena's favorite. Sebastian's smile was soft with memory and hope. She says Elena always believed that flowers should face the light, no matter how dark the earth they grew from. Sarah thought about the metaphor, growing toward light despite dark foundations, finding beauty despite difficult beginnings, creating hope from the soil of tragedy. It seemed perfect for a wedding that was happening because 2 people had chosen to trust love despite every reason to fear it. Sunflowers it is, she said, sealing the decision with a kiss that tasted like promise and possibility. As they began planning the details of their small wedding, Sarah's phone rang with a number she didn't recognize. The caller ID showed Seattle General Hospital, and her heart skipped as she wondered if there was already some emergency requiring her attention. Dr. Chun. The voice was young, nervous female. This is Dr. Amanda Foster, first-year resident at Seattle General. I'm calling because I'm facing an impossible choice, and everyone says you're the person who understands impossible choices. Sarah felt the weight of her new role settling on her shoulders, not just as Sebastian's wife or Lily's mother, but as someone whose experience could guide other doctors through the ethical minefields that came with emergency medicine. Tell me about your situation, Dr. Foster. We have 2 critical patients, a 10-year-old boy with internal bleeding and a pregnant woman with cardiac complications. Both need immediate surgery, we only have 1 available, and I have to choose who goes first. The young doctor's voice cracked with the terror of someone facing her first life or death decision. I don't know how to choose. I don't know how to live with choosing. Sarah closed her eyes, remembering the night that had changed everything. The choice between Elena and the 7-year-old boy, the split-second decision that had haunted her for 3 years until she'd learned that some choices had no right answer. only the answer you could live with. Dr. Foster, Sarah said gently, here's what I want you to remember. The fact that you're struggling with this choice proves you're the right person to make it. The doctors who don't struggle are the ones you have to worry about. But how do I choose? You choose based on medical facts, not emotional pressure. You choose based on who has the best chance of survival with immediate intervention. And then you save both of them, because that's what doctors do. We find ways to save everyone we can. Both surgeries at once? But we only have one or. Then you create a second one. You convert the trauma bay, you call in off-duty surgeons, you move heaven and earth to make sure that no one dies on your watch because of resource limitations. Sarah's voice carried the authority of someone who'd learned that impossible choices often had creative solutions. And if you can't save them both, you make the best decision you can with the information you have, and you carry it with honor instead of guilt. The line was quiet for a moment, then Dr. Foster's voice came back stronger. The trauma bay. We could convert the trauma bay. Dr. Chen, you just saved 2 lives. You saved 2 lives, Dr. Foster. I just reminded you that there are always more options than the ones you can see when you're scared. As Sarah hung up, she realized that her new role wasn't just about preventing pharmaceutical corruption. It was about mentoring young doctors through the impossible choices that would define their careers and their characters. Another doctor facing an impossible choice? Sebastian asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. The first of many, I suspect. Sarah looked around the kitchen where they'd built their family from the ashes of tragedy and deception. Are you sure you're ready to be married to someone whose phone is going to ring at all hours with medical crises? I'm ready to be married to someone who saves lives for a living, Sebastian replied, pulling her close. I'm ready to be married to someone who turns impossible choices into opportunities to help others. Lily looked up from her wedding planning with the pleased expression of someone whose family was finally, officially, completely whole. And I'm ready to have a mommy who's both a doctor and a princess. A princess? Sarah laughed, remembering the bedtime stories that had brought them together. The kind who saves herself and everyone else too, Lily said with 8-year-old certainty. The best kind. As the afternoon sun streamed through the kitchen windows, warming the space where they'd learned to be a family, Sarah felt peace settle over her for the first time since Elena Cross had died in her hands. She was Dr. Sarah Chun, physician, advocate, survivor, and soon-to-be wife and mother. She was someone who'd transformed her greatest failure into her life's purpose, who'd found love in the aftermath of loss, who'd learned that the most powerful healing came from choosing hope despite having every reason to choose fear. In 1 week, she'd marry Sebastian Cross in a ceremony filled with sunflowers and the people who'd helped them survive the darkness that had brought them together. In 2 weeks, she'd start her new job transforming emergency medicine ethics at the hospital where Elena had died. And every day after that, she'd continue building a life that honored both the woman who'd died and the family who'd lived, proving that love could bloom even in the most impossible circumstances. The background check had come back clean. The impossible choices had led to possible love. And Dr. Sarah Chin was finally completely home. What did this story teach you about the difference between surviving tragedy and transforming it into purpose, between choosing safety and choosing love, and about the truth that our greatest healing often comes from helping others heal? Sometimes the most impossible choices lead to the most powerful transformations, and the love we build from broken pieces becomes stronger than anything that was never tested by adversity. Drop your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more stories that will change how you see the world.